My husband said coldly, "This is where you belong. Go away and don't even think about taking a penny from me," and pushed me into the black swamp. I struggled and begged until I was exhausted. That bastard, if I could come back, I would make him pay. Hello, everyone. Before we start today's story, I have a small request. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos on our channel. Your support means a lot to us. Where are you watching from? Leave your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The night in the Louisiana swamp was pitch black, suffocating, and terrifying. Cicadas chirped loudly in the trees. Ethan's truck headlights cut a sharp white line through the fog, illuminating his face stiff, pale. Contorted with something between anger and madness, he yanked the back door open. "Get out, Kelly." I held my breath. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "It's the middle of the night, get out," he repeated, his jaw clenched. I stepped down, my shoes sinking into the muddy ground. The smell of stagnant water filled my lungs. I shivered and hugged myself tightly. "Please, we can talk. You don't have to scare me like this." But Ethan just stared, his pupils twitching, a slow, horrible smile spreading across his face. "I'm done with you. Kelly, you've taken enough from me. What are you talking about? Don't understand?" His voice was sharper than anything else. "You're stupid, ugly, controlling, embarrassing me in front of everyone. And you think you can walk away with half my assets? No way. What are you talking about?" "I don't understand?" I asked, my voice shaking, not daring to believe what I was hearing. Before I could back away, his hand slammed into my shoulder. I fell. The swamp swallowed me up in an instant. Cold water filled my mouth and nose. My arms writhed, scraping against hidden branches, sharp reeds, and the slimy water below. When I tried to push myself up, Ethan's hands pressed the back of my neck down. Water rushed into my throat. I choked, bubbles bursting around my face. My fingers dug into the mud, grasping nothing. My lungs spasmed, screaming for air. The world collapsed under the crushing weight of the water, the rotting taste, and the deafening pounding of my heartbeat. His voice pierced the pitch black above me. "This is where you belong." My vision blurred. My body weakened. My struggles slowed, sinking deeper into the mud. I truly believed this was how I would die, buried alive in a swamp. Unheard, unseen dot, then suddenly, the pressure was gone. I struggled to get out. My hands searching for something, anything to hold on to. Anything to keep me from sinking any further. And luck smiled on me. My hands grabbed onto a small branch of a fallen tree. I coughed, choked, gasped for air. Mud slid down my face as I wiped my eyes. My whole body was shaking, cold and heavy. I tried to use the force of the branch to push my body towards the shore. Little by little. Each second and minute felt heavy and slow. About an hour later, I finally dragged myself to a harder mud puddle. I looked up. The headlights were off. The engine was off. Ethan was gone. Just like that, I lay there, face up against the black sky. My chest heaved, each breath burning. The stench of the swamp clung to my skin. Mud, decay, and betrayal mixed into something bitter and nauseating. My arms, legs, and palms were covered in cuts. Some still bleeding. Some caked with dirt. I shivered, not from the cold, but from the realization he had left me to die. Alone. In pain, and utterly abandoned in the middle of nowhere. I am Kelly Harper, 34 years old, born and raised in the humid countryside of Louisiana, where summers don't simply feel warm, they cling to your skin like a second layer. The air is always thick with cicadas, with the smell of wet earth, with the soft rumble of distant thunder. It's the kind of place where people know each other's family trees better than their own birthdays, where lives feel slow and sun-bleached. And where I once thought love could be simple, I used to believe Ethan was the man of my dreams. He walked into my life on a scorching July afternoon, just as I was wiping down tables at a small cafe near the river. He was charming in a polished, confident way, the kind of man who made everyone else in the room feel slightly more aware of themselves. He smiled easily, spoke gently, and had the kind of presence that made me feel, for the first time in a long while, seen. Looking back, I realized how quickly everything moved. But at the time, it felt like fate. We met in that cafe. 8 months later, I was standing in a white lace dress, holding a bouquet of wildflowers, staring up at him with a heart full of certainty. I had convinced myself that this was it, the start of a beautiful life, the promise of something stable, warm, and safe. When he kissed me at the altar, I truly believed I had chosen right, but the man I married wasn't the man I lived with. The change didn't come all at once. It came in thin, almost invisible layers, a comment here, a tightened rule there. At first, I brushed them off. I told myself he was simply protective, that he loved me more intensely than anyone had before, but intensity can rot. Ethan became someone who monitored everything, where I went, who I spoke to, how long I took at the grocery store. He questioned my outfits, my messages, even the tone of my voice when I answered him. If I laughed too loudly at a joke someone else made, he would sulk for hours. If I didn't respond to a text fast enough, he'd accuse me of hiding something. He slowly cut my life away piece by piece. Friends stopped calling because he didn't want outsiders influencing my priorities. He took control of our finances because I was too trusting with money. He insisted I didn't need a job because he could provide everything. But what he provided felt more like a cage than comfort, and yet for a long time, I defended him, to myself, to others, to the quiet voice inside me that whispered that something was wrong. I told myself he was just overwhelmed, stressed, or misunderstood. I told myself his jealousy meant he cared. I convinced myself that his anger came from fear of losing me. I never realized that what he wanted was ownership, not love. By the time I understood the truth, I wasn't the same woman who once stood in a cafe and felt lucky to meet a charming stranger. I was someone smaller, quieter, clipped at the wings, and I didn't yet know the worst was coming. That night began as a fragile promise. Ethan told me he wanted to drive and talk, his voice strangely calm after days of tension. I remember sitting next to him in the car, my hands clasped in my lap, trying to believe that maybe, just maybe, he really wanted peace. I told myself not to think too much, not to assume the worst. That was always his accusation anyway, that I was being dramatic, that I imagined things that weren't real. But as the car slowed to a stop by the swamp, the truth hit me like a stone in the stomach. There was no conversation waiting for us here. The moon was almost pale, swallowed by the thick Louisiana clouds. Cicadas buzzed like static in the air. The headlights cast two sharp beams of light across the murky water and the swaying shadows of the cypress trees. Ethan stepped out first, then opened my door, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was almost dejected. "You're ruining my life, Kelly." I felt a lump in my throat. "Ethan, I don't understand. I found someone better," he snapped, as if he were tired of pretending. "Someone who won't suffocate me. And I won't let you take a penny from me when we divorce." Before I could finish, his hand was pushing me hard into the swamp, and the rest happened as you know. I don't know how long I lay there, minutes, hours, until a beam of light from the lantern cut across the water. A man's voice broke the silence. Hey, are you okay?" Henry Dawson, a fisherman, a man who was simply out checking his nets on a night when he shouldn't have been around. He carried me back to his little cabin by the river, wrapped me in a blanket, cleaned the wound on my hand, and didn't press me to explain. He saved me without me telling him, and for the first time that night, I felt something other than fear. Henry's cabin became a world of its own, a place where time seemed slower, calmer, and strangely safe. Mornings carried the smell of river water and pine, and at night the chirping of crickets wrapped around the house like a blanket. I hid, sleeping in a small living room with creaky wooden floors and a blanket that smelled faintly of cedar. My body healed, first bruises turning from purple to yellow, cuts scabbed over. My mind was slower. Henry never pushed me. He brought me hot meals, kept the fire burning, and only talked when I wanted to. Sometimes he just sat on the porch while I stared out at the river. Just silence was enough. One afternoon, while Henry was mending his fishing net, I scrolled through the old phone he'd found in a drawer and lent me. I should have stopped, but curiosity and fear got the better of me. A headline flashed across the screen: "Local man reports wife missing. Community runs together to help." He held my breath. I opened the article. Ethan's face flashed up, beaming. "Heartbroken, Kelly Harper has been missing for a week," the reporter said. And then they played a video clip. Ethan stood in front of our house, shaking his hands through his hair. His voice choked with emotion. I just want her home, he said, his eyes glistening with tears. I'm afraid something's happened to her. My heart sank. I watched him touch his forehead, his shoulders slumping as if the grief weighed him down. Strangers left flowers on the porch. Comments poured in. Poor guy, what a tragedy. I hope they find her. He wasn't just lying. He was making himself out to be a hero. I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so much I had to sit down. Fear ran down my spine, fear that he was making up a story so strong that no one would believe me if I showed up again. Fear that he would come after me. Henry found me on the porch steps, arms wrapped around my knees, breathing heavily. He didn't ask. He just sat next to me until I could speak. He's crying on TV, I whispered. Like he didn't try to drown me. Like he didn't leave me to die. Henry nodded thoughtfully, staring at the river. He's really good at pretending, he said softly. Some people do, but you're not gone, Kelly. You're still here. You should disappear, I muttered. You should let him think you're dead. Henry shook his head. You don't have to be a ghost to be free. The words sank into me like water into dry soil. Not a command. Not pressure. Just the truth. For days afterward, the words echoed in my mind. I was tired of hiding. Tired of letting Ethan manipulate the story. Tired of being a survivor who still felt trapped. Freedom isn't about running away. Freedom is about taking back what he tried to steal. So, one morning, as the sun rose over the water and Henry sipped coffee beside me, I finally said it out loud. I'll come back. Not to go back to him, but to reclaim my life, piece by piece. The next 6 months became a different kind of survival. Not hiding, fighting. Grace, the local officer Henry trusted, visited the cabin almost every week. She listened without judgment, just like Henry did, but where Henry offered safety, Grace offered structure. A path forward. We're going to build a case so solid he won't know where to breathe. She told me. So we worked. Grace photographed every fading bruise, capturing them in cold, clinical frames. Henry helped me retrieve the dashcam from Ethan's truck, still sitting abandoned near the tow yard. The camera had recorded more than just the drive toward the swamp. It had captured Ethan's voice, his tone, the quiet satisfaction in the way he'd spoken to me that night at a nearby gas station. Grace obtained the security footage, Ethan shoving me back into the car when I tried to step out. Not dramatic. Not violent enough for strangers to notice. But clear once you knew what to look for. Piece by piece, the truth took shape. Half a year later, Grace called with a simple sentence. They've got him. Ethan was detained at an interstate checkpoint. Luggage in the trunk and a woman in the passenger seat, someone I had never seen. He was leaving the state. Leaving behind his missing wife. The courthouse smelled like old paper and lemon disinfectant. I sat in the back row as they brought him in. Same expensive haircut. Same confident posture. But when his eyes landed on me, he froze. Shock first, then calculation, then the soft mask he wore for the world slid into place. Thank God you're back, he said, voice trembling. I was so worried about you. The room murmured, some people even nodding sympathetically. He looked like a man relieved, a man grateful, a man desperate to show compassion, but I wasn't the same woman he had dragged into the mud. I stood. The judge motioned for silence, and Grace walked to the evidence table. She plugged in a small speaker, pressed a button, and stepped back. A crackle, a hiss of wind. Then his voice, calm, low, unmistakably has filled the room. This is exactly where you belong. The courtroom went still. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Ethan's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, shut it, opened it again. His hand shook. The woman he had tried to leave the state with stared at him. As if seeing him for the first time, the judge leaned forward. The jurors whispered to one another, and for the first time, Ethan had nothing to say. Grace paused the recording. But the words hung in the air like smoke. The same sentence he had used when he forced me toward the swamp. The same sentence that had echoed in my head for months. Now it echoed through the courtroom evidence. Truth, justice. And Ethan could no longer run from it. The verdict came down on a warm afternoon that smelled faintly of rain. I sat in the courtroom, hands clasped in my lap, as the judge read the sentence. His voice was steady, absolute, leaving no space for doubt or sympathy. Ethan Harper, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Premeditated attempted murder, The words didn't hit me all at once. They settled over me slowly, like dust drifting through a still room. Ethan didn't look at me as they led him away. He didn't shout or argue. He just kept his eyes forward, jaw tight as if refusing to acknowledge that his story was ending. But mine wasn't. A week later, I packed everything I owned, 2 boxes of clothes, a few journals, and a ceramic mug Henry insisted I take, and left Louisiana behind. The swamps receded in the rearview mirror, the familiar humid air slowly replaced by something lighter, cleaner. I drove until the road curved toward a quiet riverside town, a place where the mornings smelled like dew and the evenings carried the faint aroma of pine. I rented a tiny building with peeling white paint and wide front windows. It used to be a tailor shop. Now it became something else. I called it Bayou Bloom. The name felt like a tribute not to the swamp where I almost died, but to the part of me that crawled out of it and refused to disappear. The first week was slow, a couple of locals curious about the newcomer, a few orders for birthdays and anniversaries. But arranging flowers steadied me. Petals softened something inside me that had been rigid for too long. Henry showed up on the 4th day. He didn't knock. Just walked in with a bucket of fresh-caught catfish and a grin that deepened the lines around his eyes. "Thought you might need dinner," he said. I really laughed. It felt strange, like stretching a muscle I hadn't used in years. Sometimes he came by with groceries. Sometimes with tools to fix a loose hinge or a flickering light. Sometimes he brought nothing at all, just sat with me in the tiny staff room, quietly sipping coffee while the river breeze nudged the wind chimes outside. We talked, but often we didn't need to. Silence with Henry wasn't heavy. It wasn't a threat. It felt like rest. As months passed, customers began knowing my name. They came to me for bouquets, for sympathy arrangements, for first date flowers. I learned their stories, their children's names, their worries. I learned how to belong without disappearing, how to trust without losing myself. And somewhere along the way, I realized something important. I no longer checked over my shoulder. I no longer woke up gasping. I no longer saw the swamp when I closed my eyes. I wasn't hiding anymore, I was living. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. The morning I returned to the swamp, the world was wrapped in silver mist. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and moss, the same way it had that night, but everything felt different now. I stood at the edge of the muddy bank, my boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. The still water reflected nothing but a pale wash of dawn. In my hands was a small bundle of wildflowers. Simple, soft, alive. I took a step closer. The old boards of the wooden walkway creaked under my weight, just like they had months ago when I crawled out of this place, shaking and barely breathing. I remembered the cold against my skin, the taste of mud in my mouth, the terror pressing against my ribs, but now, standing here, I felt none of that. Just a quiet certainty. I knelt and let the flowers slip from my fingers. They floated gently, drifting outward across the dark surface like tiny lights. "No, Ethan," I whispered, my voice steady. "This isn't where I belong." I survived. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. The swamp swallowed them quietly, like it swallowed every secret ever left in its shadows. But for me, saying them out loud was enough. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure for him. It was recognition for me. I stood, brushing my hands on my jeans as the mist began to thin. Sunlight pierced through the pale curtain of fog, catching droplets in the air and turning them into small glittering beads. Warmth spread across my shoulders. Soft and real, I turned away from the water. Behind me was the place where I almost died. Ahead of me was the life I chose. As I walked back toward the narrow dirt path leading to the road, I felt something inside me settle like a door quietly closing, not with anger, but with certainty. My breaths were slow, even, my steps unhurried. For months, I had carried the weight of what happened here. The fear, the memories, the bruises that took longer to fade from my mind than my skin. But standing there, offering nothing more than a handful of wildflowers, I realized that I wasn't defined by what Ethan did to me. I was defined by what I did after. Survival isn't about escaping death. It's about choosing life, and I finally chose mine.